The official paperwork for the next reign is already signed, but one critical name has been completely left off the guest list. Prince William has reportedly made a final, unyielding decision about his future coronation day. When the crown is placed on his head, Queen Camilla will not be in the building. It is a stunning move that breaks a 40-year palace truce. And the quiet confrontation that sparked this breakdown happened behind closed doors just days ago. The Midnight Directive. A single sheet of heavy parchment sat on a mahogany desk inside Kensington Palace late last Tuesday night. The document contained the preliminary logistics for a future state event. It required a signature to authorize the initial funding allocations. The pen belonged to the Prince of Wales. He did not sign the bottom line immediately. Instead, he drew a thick black line through a specific name in the visitor columns. He handed the paper back to a senior courtier. His instruction was brief and final. The woman who currently wears the crown will have no place at his ceremony. This was not a sudden burst of anger. The decision had been forming for months behind the high stone walls of the royal estate. Courtiers in London have spent years assuming that continuity would guide the next transition. They believed the family would present a united front to the world when the time came. That assumption ended with a single pen stroke. The order was issued quietly, without a press release or a public statement. But the ripple effect through the household staff was immediate. The paperwork involved is part of a sensitive archive. Staff members refer to these files as the transition logs. They are updated constantly to reflect changing titles, health realities, and logistical needs. Usually, these updates involve minor changes to car convoys or seating arrangements. This change was different. It altered the entire structure of the next state occasion. The courtier left the room with the modified paper. The atmosphere in the offices shifted instantly. Aides immediately began reviewing the legal parameters of the directive. A future monarch possesses absolute authority over state guest lists. No law forces a new king to invite his stepmother to his own crowning ceremony. The decision rests entirely with the person taking the oath. William knows this power well. He chose this specific moment to exercise it. The timing suggests he wanted the decision formalized before any further joint planning took place. The public still sees a family operating in harmony. Recent photographs show them standing together on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. They smile for the cameras. They wave to the crowds filling the mall. But those images are carefully managed illusions. The reality inside the private apartments is vastly different. The tension has reached a level where staff members must carefully coordinate schedules to prevent accidental meetings in the hallways. The directive targets a specific royal tradition. Historically, a dowager queen attends the coronation of her husband's successor. It symbolizes the continuity of the crown. It shows respect for the previous reign. By removing her name, William is breaking with centuries of established protocol. He is signaling a complete break from the current era. The move is designed to be permanent and irreversible. The palace staff now faces a logistical nightmare. They must plan two entirely different versions of the future. One version satisfies the current king's wishes. The other version fulfills the future king's explicit demands. The files must be kept completely separate. A mix-up could cause an unprecedented diplomatic incident within the family. Courtiers are walking on eggshells to keep the secret from spreading to the wider public. The conflict centers on a fundamental disagreement about status. Charles spent decades working to ensure his wife would be accepted by the British public. He secured the title of Queen Consort for her before his mother passed away. Later, the wording was simplified to Queen. He viewed that achievement as the culmination of his life's work. William's recent order threatens to dismantle that legacy in a single day. The Prince of Wales has not offered a public explanation. He does not intend to give one. His actions speak through the administrative changes he enforces. Those close to the planning committees understand the message clearly. The future king is taking control of his destiny. He is refusing to let the compromises of the past dictate the terms of his future court. The removal of the name creates an immediate problem for the protocol diary. State events require months of precise scheduling. Seating charts are arranged according to strict rules of precedence. Leaving a seat empty next to the highest-ranking royals creates a highly visible statement. The planning committee must now find a way to explain that space without admitting to a deep family divide. Some aides suggested a compromise during the late-night meeting. They proposed offering a private viewing suite away from the main altar. William rejected the idea instantly. He specified that she should not be present in the abbey at all. The exclusion is total. It applies to the ceremony, the procession, and the official portraits that follow. The documentation has already been locked in a secure safe. Only a handful of individuals possess the clearance to view the updated files. The secrecy is vital to maintaining public confidence in the institution. If the full details of this directive became public today, it would overshadow the current work of the monarchy. It would turn every public appearance into a search for signs of betrayal. The courtier who received the signed paper spent the remaining hours of the night adjusting the digital calendar. Every entry connected to the future state event had to be cross-referenced. References to specific tiaras and robes were quietly deleted from the inventory lists. The task was purely administrative, but the weight of the decision hung heavily in the quiet office. The decision introduces a massive question mark over the future of the royal estate. If the current queen is excluded from the coronation, her entire post-reign existence will change. She will lose her official platform. Her security arrangements will be scaled back. Her social standing will evaporate. William is not just planning a ceremony. He is defining the terms of a complete exile. The tension is no longer confined to theoretical planning. It has begun to impact daily operations. The two households operate almost like independent states. Messages are passed through formal channels rather than informal chats. The warmth that once existed during family gatherings at Sandringham has vanished. It has been replaced by a rigid, icy professionalism. The Prince of Wales remains focused on his long-term vision. He believes the monarchy must be stripped of past controversies to survive in the modern era. He views the presence of his stepmother at his coronation as a link to a turbulent past. He wants his reign to begin with a clean slate. That desire for a fresh start outweighs any concern for family harmony. The document on the mahogany desk was just the beginning. It represents the opening move in a high-stakes struggle for the future narrative of the House of Windsor. The lines have been drawn in black ink. The staff now knows exactly where the future king stands. They must execute his orders while maintaining the public facade of a unified family. The countdown to the transition has begun, and the rules have changed forever, breaking the 40-year truce. A black luxury sedan pulled up to the rear entrance of a prominent London charity headquarters on the first Thursday of last month. The vehicle belonged to the household of the Duchess of Cornwall in Cambridge, a title used before the recent shifts in hierarchy. The door opened, but nobody got out. Instead, a security officer spoke briefly into a radio receiver. Within 2 minutes, the car moved away from the curb and entered the city traffic. The scheduled joint appearance between two generations of royal women was canceled without a word of explanation to the waiting photographers at the front gates. The press room at the palace blamed a sudden scheduling conflict. They claimed an overlapping meeting required immediate attention elsewhere. The true explanation sat in a locked drawer at Clarence House. It was a brief typed memo detailing a disagreement over public positioning. The truce that had kept the peace for decades had finally shattered. It was a fragile agreement that dated back to the late 1980s. The original arrangement was simple. The family agreed that public duty must always eclipse private feelings. Private dinners were kept separate, but major state occasions required a show of total solidarity. For 40 years, this system worked. The public grew accustomed to seeing everyone standing in a neat row at the annual remembrance services. They assumed the past had been buried under a mountain of protocol. The cancellation of the charity event changed everything. It was the first time the public schedule reflected the deep anger brewing behind the scenes. Staff members had spent 3 weeks coordinating the arrival times down to the exact second. The sudden cancellation left a gap in the royal diary that could not be easily explained away. It signaled to insiders that the long-standing truce was officially over. A senior logistics coordinator resigned 3 days later. Rumors circulated within the royal mews that the pressure had become unbearable. The job now required managing a hidden Cold War between two households. Aides were forced to choose sides. Memorandums from one office were routinely ignored by the other. The smooth machinery of the state began to grind to a halt. The roots of the truce date back to a meeting in 1999 at St. James's Palace. It was the first time the young princes were introduced to the woman who would eventually marry their father. The meeting lasted exactly 30 minutes. No photographs were taken. No statements were issued to the press. The agreement reached that day was clear. The children would show public respect, but they would never be forced to accept a replacement for their mother. That agreement held through the royal wedding in 2005. The ceremony at the Guildhall in Windsor was deliberately low-key. The guest list was small. The public reaction was mixed, but quiet. The palace believed the worst of the crisis had passed. They assumed time would heal the deep rifts within the family. They were wrong. The anger did not disappear. It simply waited for the right moment to surface. The current escalation began with the planning for the upcoming Commonwealth Summit. The seating arrangements for the opening banquet required the two households to share a single table. The office at Kensington Palace requested a modification to the floor plan. They asked for a wide gap between the two principal seating areas. The request was denied by the King's personal secretary. The response from the Prince's team was immediate. They pulled out of the joint briefing entirely. The dispute is no longer about personal preferences. It is about the future direction of the institution. One side believes the monarchy must honor the compromises that allowed it to survive the turbulent 90s. They view the current queen as an essential pillar of the current reign. The other side sees her presence as a permanent stain on the family history. They want to erase that element from the narrative as soon as possible. A quiet investigation was launched into a series of information leaks last autumn. Sensitive details about private family dinners began appearing in Sunday tabloids. The stories described an atmosphere of intense awkwardness at the dinner table. One report claimed the prince refused to address his stepmother by her official title during a private birthday celebration. The investigation failed to find the source of the leaks, but it deepened the mistrust between the two camps. The palace security teams have altered their daily routines to accommodate the new reality. When the prince visits his father, the schedule is cleared of all other appointments. Staff members ensure the queen is resting in a separate wing of the palace before the visitor arrives. These precautions prevent any chance of an accidental confrontation in the public rooms. The breakdown of the truce has created complications for international visits. Foreign governments must be briefed on the internal dynamics before hosting a royal tour. Diplomats are quietly told to avoid scheduling joint receptions. They must create separate itineraries for the different factions. The situation requires an extraordinary level of tact from foreign service officers who are used to dealing with unified state delegations. The financial implications of the dispute are also beginning to emerge. The funding for various royal charities is tied to specific duchy estates. The transition of these estates created a shift in financial power. The prince now controls the revenues that previously supported several joint initiatives. Aides have noticed a quiet withdrawal of financial support from projects closely associated with the Queen's personal interests. The public remains largely unaware of the depth of the division. They see the occasional joint appearance at major national events. They watch the formal processions through the streets of London, but the body language tells a different story to trained observers. The distance between the key figures has grown wider in recent months. The forced smiles disappear the moment the cameras turn away. The conflict reached a new peak during a meeting of the Privy Council last Tuesday. A routine item concerning the administration of the royal collection was brought forward for discussion. The item required approval from both the current monarch and the heir to the throne. The debate became uncharacteristically heated over a minor detail regarding the display of certain historic portraits. The meeting adjourned early without a resolution. The breakdown is affecting the younger generation of the family as well. The children are shielded from the worst of the tension, but they notice the absence of certain relatives at private gatherings. Birthday parties and holiday celebrations are now held in smaller, separate groups. The festive atmosphere that once defined the holidays at the country estates has been replaced by a rigid schedule of brief, separate visits. The court is now dividing into distinct factions. Long-serving courtiers who remember the events of the 90s are increasingly being replaced by younger, more fiercely loyal advisors. These new aides are not bound by the old agreements. They view the conflict through a purely strategic lens. They are focused entirely on securing the position of the future king, regardless of the cost to current family harmony. The paper trail of this dispute is carefully guarded. Emails between the two offices are encrypted using advanced security protocols. Physical memos are shredded immediately after they are read. The fear of a public scandal drives both sides to maintain an iron curtain of secrecy. Yet, the tension is too great to be completely contained behind closed doors. The current situation is unsustainable for the long-term health of the monarchy. The institution relies on the perception of stability to maintain its position in public life. A prolonged conflict between the current reign and the next threatens to undermine that stability. The advisors know this, but neither side is willing to make the first concession. The 40-year truce is dead, and no one knows what will replace it. The shadow of Spencer blood, a sapphire and diamond brooch, clinked against the edge of a crystal glass during a formal diplomatic reception at Lancaster House late last month. The current queen adjusted the piece of jewelry on her left lapel before stepping forward to greet the visiting dignitaries. It was a historic piece, once frequently worn by the late Princess of Wales. The choice of jewelry did not go unnoticed by the guests in the room. Within minutes, an encrypted text message left the building, heading directly to the private secretary at Anmer Hall. The response from the eastern counties arrived less than an hour later. It contained a simple instruction to verify the inventory numbers of the entire royal jewelry collection. The incident was more than a minor clash over fashion choices. It exposed a deep, unresolved struggle over physical history and inheritance. The bloodline of the Spencer family remains an active force inside the palace walls. The prince views himself as the primary guardian of his mother's material legacy. He does not tolerate any perceived attempt to alter that narrative. The historical records from 1996 detail the division of the personal property following the famous royal divorce. A specific clause in the settlement guaranteed that certain sentimental items would be preserved for the children. They were stored in high-security vaults beneath the city. For decades, those vaults remained undisturbed. The items were brought out only for special family exhibitions or private viewings. The recent reappearance of these specific pieces on state occasions changed the dynamic completely. The public saw it as a routine display of historic crown assets. The prince saw it as a direct violation of a long-standing oral agreement. He believed certain symbols belong exclusively to one memory. He reacted by demanding a full accounting of all items currently allocated to the Queen's dressing rooms. A senior curator from the royal collection spent 48 hours reviewing the ledger books. The task required cross-referencing acquisitions dating back to the reign of Queen Victoria. The curator found that several pieces had been reclassified during the transition period of 2022. The reclassification allowed the items to be loaned out, without prior consultation with the wider family. The tension over the jewelry collection reflects a much larger battle over historical memory. The prince has spent his entire adult life watching the gradual rehabilitation of his stepmother's public image. He accepted the political necessity of her rise during his father's long wait for the throne. But his patience ended when that rise began to overlap with the symbols of his mother's life. The issue became critical during a planning meeting for a national portrait project. The organizers wanted to include a series of composite images showcasing the evolution of royal style over the last 50 years. The selection included prominent photographs from the 1992 tour of Korea. The prince's team requested the immediate removal of those specific images from the public gallery. They offered no alternative selections. The rejection caused a significant delay in the production schedule. The publishing house had already printed the initial proofs for the exhibition catalog. They faced thousands of pounds in losses if they had to scrap the layout. The palace refused to cover the additional costs, leading to a tense standoff between the administrators and the commercial partners. The internal dispute is deeply rooted in a series of promises made in 1997. In the weeks following the tragedy in Paris, a small group of family advisors met at Balmoral Castle. They established a framework for protecting the young princes from public controversy. One of the core tenets was that the memory of their mother would be protected from institutional erasure. The current prince views his coronation guest list as the ultimate fulfillment of that promise. The Queen's advisors argue that her current rank entitles her to full access to the state collection. They point out that the jewelry belongs to the institution, not to any individual family line. They view the prince's restrictions as an unnecessary attempt to diminish her official standing. The argument has created an impasse that no courtier has been able to resolve. The security staff at the vaults have been caught in the middle of this bureaucratic warfare. They receive conflicting orders regarding access permissions. One week, an item is cleared for transport to a public engagement. The next week, a counter order arrives from Kensington Palace, locking the piece down indefinitely. The staff must log every request with extreme precision to avoid disciplinary action. The dispute has extended to the management of regional estates as well. A small cottage on the grounds of the Highgrove estate contains an archive of personal letters and photographs from the 80s. The Queen's team suggested consolidating these files into the main library at Windsor Castle for better preservation. The Prince blocked the transfer within 3 hours of the proposal hitting his desk. The sudden intervention surprised many within the archival department. They viewed the consolidation as a routine clerical task. They did not realize that every physical object connected to that era is viewed through a lens of absolute territorial control. The Prince will not allow any document from his mother's life to be managed by staff answering to his stepmother. The tension was visible during the annual summer opening of the state rooms. Visitors noticed that a prominent portrait of the late princess had been moved from the grand corridor to a smaller, semi-private waiting room. The palace guidebook still listed the original location. The sudden relocation sparked intense speculation among royal biographers who tracked these subtle changes. The mystery behind the moving portrait was solved by a retired footman who spoke to an acquaintance in the hospitality industry. The Queen had requested that the space be cleared for a collection of modern landscape paintings. The Prince discovered the change during a routine walkthrough of the state apartments. He immediately ordered the landscape paintings returned to storage, though the portrait was not moved back to its original spot. The compromise satisfied neither side. It left a prominent wall completely blank for the remainder of the tourist season. The space served as a silent testament to the ongoing power struggle inside the household. Staff members avoided looking at the blank wall during their daily rounds. The situation has created a permanent state of alertness among the palace press officers. They know that a single photograph of the Queen wearing the wrong heirloom could trigger a fresh wave of internal conflict. They must carefully vet every outfit before it appears in front of the cameras. The process adds hours of extra work to an already demanding schedule. The Prince remains entirely unmoved by appeals for family unity on this issue. He views his connection to the Spencer bloodline as a distinct entity that operates outside the ordinary rules of the court. He is determined to ensure that when his reign begins, the legacy of his mother will stand completely undiminished. The removal of his stepmother from the coronation plans is simply the final, logical step in that lifelong mission. A king divided in the private apartments. A silver tea service was laid out on a low table inside the garden room at Sandringham House during the second weekend of January. The morning light struggled to pierce the thick mist rolling off the Norfolk coast. The current monarch sat in a high-backed armchair, holding a leather-bound folder containing the latest state transition drafts. His son sat directly opposite him, refusing the offered refreshments. A veteran steward stood just outside the heavy oak doors, waiting to clear the tray. Instead of the usual murmur of family conversation, the steward heard a sharp exchange of words that caused him to step back into the main gallery. The argument centered on the exact wording of the future accession declaration. The king wanted an explicit clause guaranteeing his wife's permanent status as a queen dowager with full state honors. The prince flatly refused to include the phrasing in any future legislation. The disagreement was not a minor debate over legal semantics. It was a direct clash of wills between the present ruler and the man who will succeed him. The official diaries show that the king spent the remainder of that winter weekend canceling his planned outdoor activities. He remained in his private study, consulting via telephone with constitutional lawyers in Westminster. He discovered that his powers to protect his wife's future position are legally limited once his own reign ends. The crown prerogatives shift entirely to the next sovereign the moment the succession occurs. This legal reality has created an intense sense of urgency within the king's personal office. For decades, the king operated under the assumption that his son would respect his wishes out of sheer filial duty. That belief dissolved during the Sandringham meeting. The prince made it clear that his loyalty to his father does not extend to endorsing the woman who replaced his mother. The tension within the private apartments has changed the daily routine of the household staff. Pages and dressers must now check the internal security monitors before moving between the public drawing rooms and the private quarters. A system of staggered mealtimes has been quietly introduced when both households reside at the same country estate. The goal is to avoid an unplanned encounter that could spark another argument. The dispute has also infected the planning for the annual royal calendar. The king's team proposed a major joint tour of several Commonwealth nations to mark his upcoming milestone birthday. The itinerary required the prince to fly out and join them for the final leg of the journey in Canberra. The prince's office declined the invitation within 48 hours, citing prior commitments with his own foundation work. The refusal left the logistics team with a half-empty flight schedule and a massive hole in the public relations strategy. Foreign governments had already budgeted for a full state reception involving both generations of the family. The sudden change forced diplomats to rewrite the event briefs, downplaying the absence of the heir to the throne. The official explanation blamed a routine scheduling conflict, but Foreign Service insiders knew the truth. The roots of this specific standoff lie in the financial restructuring that occurred in 2022. When the prince inherited the vast revenues of the Duchy of Cornwall, he gained complete financial independence from the main sovereign grant. He no longer relies on his father's approval to fund his household or his personal projects. This economic shift altered the power balance within the family permanently. The king currently finds himself in a deeply isolating position. He spent a lifetime cultivating relationships with senior politicians to ensure his wife's eventual acceptance. He secured the public blessing of the late queen before her passing. Yet, all of those political victories mean nothing if his own successor refuses to honor them. The king's authority stops at the boundary of his own lifetime. A mysterious package arrived at a prominent legal firm on Chancery Lane late last month. The courier delivery contained a copy of a private trust deed established by the family in the late 60s. The document outlines the distribution of non-state property, including several private residences in Scotland. A junior clerk noticed that the deed had been flagged for an urgent validity review by an anonymous client. The review was quietly initiated by the king's personal lawyers. They were searching for a loophole that would allow the king to grant his wife a lifetime tenancy at one of the major private estates without needing the next monarch's permission. The legal findings were discouraging. The deeds are tied strictly to the crown's succession, meaning the future king can revoke any tenancy agreement at will. The discovery deepened the anxiety inside the king's inner circle. They realized that the queen faces the genuine prospect of social and geographical displacement once the reign changes. The prince has already indicated to his housing administrators that he intends to streamline the management of the country properties, focusing resources exclusively on his immediate family. The queen has remained silent throughout these developments. She continues to attend her scheduled readings and charity events, maintaining her trademark calm demeanor in public. But her close associates report that she has begun quietly moving some of his personal books and paintings from the main rooms at Clarence House to her private house in Wiltshire. The slow, methodical transfer of property suggests she is preparing for a sudden exit. The staff at the Wiltshire property have noticed an increase in security upgrades around the perimeter. New fencing and advanced camera systems were installed by a private contractor over the spring holidays. The funding for these upgrades did not come from the official royal security budget. It was paid for directly from the king's private accounts, bypassing the standard parliamentary oversight committees. The king's health struggles have added a layer of emotional weight to the conflict. He wishes to spend his remaining years focusing on statecraft and his environmental legacies. Instead, he finds himself trapped in an endless series of administrative battles with his own son over the future of his wife. The stress has taken a visible toll on his energy levels during recent state functions. The prince maintains that his position is not personal. He frames his decisions entirely around the long-term survival of the crown. He believes the public will never fully accept a coronation that honors the past controversies of his parents' marriage. He views his refusal to accommodate his stepmother as a necessary act of modernization, stripping the court of its old scandals. The standoff inside the private apartments remains completely unresolved. The silver tea service at Sandringham was cleared away that morning, with the food largely untouched. The father and son parted without the traditional embrace, leaving the courtiers to manage a fractured household. The king continues to rule, but the shadow of his son's future court grows longer with each passing day. Operation Golden Throne unravels. A digital security alert flashed on a monitor in the basement offices of the Lord Chamberlain's department at 10 o'clock last Wednesday morning. An administrative clerk had accessed the central database for state ceremonial planning. The file, codenamed Operation Golden Throne, contains the highly confidential blueprints for the next accession. The clerk noticed that several subfolders regarding the secondary seating arrangements had been modified overnight. The official titles reserved for the spouse of a deceased monarch had been completely removed from the active templates. The digital updates were not a technical glitch. They were the direct result of the administrative directive issued from Kensington Palace. For years, the planning committees had worked under a standardized protocol. They assumed the transition would mirror past 20th century ceremonies, where a dowager queen was afforded a prominent position of honor next to the bloodline royals. The new entries proved that those traditional assumptions had been discarded. The revised database showed that the planning has now split into two entirely separate operations. The first plan satisfies the current king's immediate administrative requirements for daily state functions. The second plan, which remains hidden behind advanced encryption blocks, maps out an entirely different reality. In this future scenario, the entire court structure is condensed. The administrative apparatus that currently supports the Queen's public work is scheduled for immediate liquidation the moment the reign changes. The logistics team at St. James's Palace spent the remainder of the week trying to reconcile the conflicting data. They face an impossible task. To comply with the future king's explicit orders, they must draft a state ceremony that completely ignores the existence of the current king's wife. To comply with the current king's orders, they must maintain the fiction that she will be honored. The staff is caught in a legalistic trap, forced to manage two competing versions of royal history. The tension has reached the point where specific departments are actively working against one another. Aides in the master of the household's office recently ordered a shipment of specialized silk ribbons from a traditional manufacturer in Coventry. The ribbons were intended for the Queen's official coronation robes. The order was abruptly canceled 48 hours later by a finance officer answering directly to the prince's treasury team. The manufacturer was paid a standard cancellation fee, and the incident was quietly erased from the commercial ledgers. The mystery of the canceled order quickly spread through the palace workshops. Dressmakers and embroiderers, who have spent decades preparing for state events, began to realize that the work they were doing for the current queen might never see the light of day. The atmosphere in the sewing rooms became intensely awkward. Staff members avoided discussing the upcoming projects, focusing instead on routine maintenance of the existing crown assets. The prince's team has also initiated a comprehensive review of the official royal website and digital archives. A media consultancy firm based in Soho was given a discreet contract to draft a new digital layout for the monarchy's public platform. The new design features a highly streamlined family tree. The historical sections covering the marriages of the current king have been significantly condensed, focusing heavily on the lineage of the next generation. The digital restructuring is a deliberate effort to prepare the public for a sudden shift in institutional focus. The prince believes the modern audience demands absolute clarity from the monarchy. He views the complex compromises of the past as a potential threat to the stability of the crown. By removing the administrative and symbolic presence of his stepmother from the plans, he is establishing a clear, uncomplicated line of succession that begins with his own family. The current queen's inner circle has not ignored these administrative maneuvers. A quiet meeting was held at a private club on Pall Mall over the weekend, involving several of her closest long-term advisors. They discussed the rapid acceleration of the prince's planning initiatives. They realized that their ability to protect her legacy is diminishing with every passing month. The power dynamic within the institution has shifted permanently toward the future court, leaving the current queen's team increasingly isolated. The cost of ultimate loyalty. The final proof of the state guest list was locked inside a steel dispatch box at Kensington Palace as the weekend drew to a close. The document represents the absolute culmination of the prince's long-term strategy. The spaces where the current queen and her extended family were meant to sit have been entirely reassigned to senior charitable representatives and modern civic leaders. The decision is now an unyielding part of the future state record, completely immune to further internal debate. The total finality of the move has sent a shockwave through the oldest ranks of the court. For decades, the survival of the House of Windsor depended on its ability to absorb conflict and present a facade of absolute unity to the world. By enforcing this strict banishment, the prince is choosing a completely different path. He is prioritizing absolute loyalty to his mother's memory, over the traditional public relations requirements of the family. The decision carries immense long-term risks for the institution. When the time comes for the transition, the absence of the previous king's wife will be impossible to hide from the global media. The space at the center of the abbey will become the primary focus of every news broadcast, completely overshadowing the historic significance of the day. It will instantly revive the turbulent debates of the 1990s, dragging the old scandals back into the modern spotlight. The prince remains entirely unfazed by these potential complications. He has made his calculations with a cold, administrative precision. He believes the temporary media storm is a price worth paying to ensure a clean, permanent break from the past. He is willing to accept the immediate controversy in exchange for a reign that is entirely free from the historical burdens of his parents' divorce. The current king now faces the painful realization that his life's work to legitimize his wife will not outlast his own tenure on the throne. The titles, the state honors, and the public acceptance he spent 40 years fighting to secure are being dismantled systematically while he is still ruling. The power of the crown is slipping away from the present and flowing directly into the hands of the future. The daily operations of the monarchy continue to function on the surface, but the machinery is hollow. The two courts exist in a state of total, permanent separation, waiting for the inevitable moment when the transition occurs. The ink on the administrative logs is dry, the encrypted files are locked, and the future has been decided behind closed doors. The prince has taken control of the narrative, ensuring that when the crown is placed upon his head, his mother's legacy will stand completely alone. The battle lines for the next reign have been drawn in permanent ink inside the palace archives. Prince William's uncompromising decision to exclude Queen Camilla from his future coronation marks the definitive end of a 40-year family truce. By choosing absolute loyalty to Princess Diana's memory, the future king is preparing to reshape the British monarchy entirely on his own terms. What do you think about this dramatic shift in palace power? Is William right to protect his mother's legacy, or is this move risking the stability of the royal family? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden world of royal history.